Well, hello and welcome to In the Growth Space. My name is David McGlennon, and I am so glad that you're here. We've made it to episode 172. Really excited about this particular episode because it's a new segment that I came up with while I was on my sabbatical. You know, one of the advantages of getting away and taking some time to think and really create, it helps to clarify some thinking. And so one of the thoughts that I had is to create a regular segment that we're going to have here on the podcast where my good friend and colleague, Andy Hall, and I get together and we have conversations about what are we doing ourselves to keep ourselves in our growth zone and keep ourselves in our own growth space. And so that's what today is. Today is a kickoff of that segment. And so I'm really excited to share this with you, and I'm especially excited to be able to share it with my good friend and colleague, Andy Hall. So we're going to go ahead and get into this conversation right now. And what I really want to encourage you to do is find something that we say and something in this conversation that you can take away and implement. Because being in your growth zone doesn't mean just sitting back and listening. It's actually listening, taking it in, and then taking action on something. So I want to invite you to take action on something. And then if you're brave or if you just want to share it, I would love to know. So send me an email, david@davidmcglennon.com, and just share with me the one takeaway that you've implemented from our conversation here today. So without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Coach's Corner. Well, hello, Andy. It is so great to have you back on In the Growth Space. Welcome, my friend.
Well, it's great to be here. I was just reflecting on when the last time was, and it was sitting in that studio in Pittsburgh last time we did this, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And if I'm remembering right, it was not long after my very first sabbatical. And so we were talking about that,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is
yeah,
really,
right.
really cool. Well, you know, today I thought what would be really cool for our listeners to just hear from a couple of guys who are professional coaches, professional facilitators, and leadership development people. How do we keep ourselves growing? How do we keep moving and progressing and evolving in our own lives, in our own practices? And I know that you've got a story that's like really, really relevant, especially right now, because it's something that you in the past, when we first met, you had a little card with your burning desire and the Napoleon Hill 6 steps, right? And,
Yeah, yeah.
and I saw you look at it. I know that it's right there, right? Yeah. And so why don't you tell people about that? Let's maybe start there because I think this is really relevant to a growth path and a growth journey.
Well, it it started with being introduced to Think and Grow Rich via our mentor Paul Martinelli.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know how long ago that was now, although I think actually with some of the things that we've shared messages on today, I can probably work it out.
Mhm.
But I know I've been through Paul's Think and Grow Rich teaching every time that he's done it.
Yeah.
Um, and the very first time that I was introduced to it, if you if you've read the book or if you've followed the program, um, the first real chapter of the book, outside of the author's preface and the introduction, is the chapter on desire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Hill talks about in the book having an all-consuming burning desire.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was really aware of that term before being introduced to the book. I think I was aware of goal setting through and
Sure.
objective setting through my corporate career. But I was well into my solopreneur career, I think, by the time I was introduced to it.
Sure.
And really, in simplistic terms, what is an all-consuming burning desire? I guess it does what it says on the tin. You know, it's
Yeah.
about living out your purpose.
Yeah.
And within the chapter on desire, there are 6 steps. He talks about, do the 6 steps.
Yeah.
And I can remember that very first teaching of Paul, teaching Think and Grow Rich, and almost screaming down. I think it was free conference call at the time. I don't think we were into Zoom and
Yeah. I
and
don't think
Teams
so.
and that
Yeah.
that sort of thing by now. So we were on free conferencing, and I remember Paul, teaching the point and talking about the 6 steps. Um, and I remember him sort of spending almost the last 2 minutes of that call saying, look, if you don't do anything else, if you get nothing else from this chapter, do the 6 steps. Are you
Yeah.
listening to me? You know, what have you got to go and do? Do the 6 steps.
Right.
Just go and do the 6 steps. Um, and the 6 steps are really working out what your burning desire is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is it you want? What is it you're going to give in return for it? Um, ensuring you've got a plan. Um, and I'm not quite got all the 6 steps off the top of my head, but in short, and also write your 6 steps out, write it out,
Write it
and
out.
then
Yeah.
read it twice a day,
You're right.
morning and night.
Yeah.
And as David said just a few moments ago, you know, I've had that burning desire card and statement in place since I think 2018. I'm
Sure.
pretty sure it's 2018.
Sure.
Um, and you and I recognize, I think that we met and spent time together. I think a few years, just a few years before that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that burning desire statement has evolved and been
Sure.
updated over
Yeah.
that period of time, but the principle stays the same.
Mm-hmm.
What has changed over the period of time is probably the time and the milestones.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, David, in terms of why is it relevant right now,
Yeah.
one of the key part of my burning desire was to live and work in the United States.
Yeah.
Um, Now, there was a date, interesting enough, attached to that the first time around when I was
Sure.
working on it, and it was by January the 1st, 2020.
Ah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, here we are on the recording this on the 6th of September,
Right.
2024.
Uh-huh.
So, really interesting in terms of setting a goal and setting a date um, and not achieving that date. Um, but here we are on the 6th of September, 2024, and I'm just over a week away. In
Mm.
fact, this time tomorrow, next week, I will be in the United States, and I'll be in the United States for this time for 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the
Yeah.
most I've ever spent in the United States at any one time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also be able to spend those 10 weeks in the US absolutely 100% legally. Now,
Yeah.
I could spend 10 weeks in the US legally anyway, because I think, without any form of visa or
Sure.
green card, I can spend 90 days a year. Um, but about 3 or 4 months ago, we were granted our green card. So we know
Oh.
we
Yeah.
are we are immigrants now of the United
Yes.
States.
I love it. I
And
love
we
it.
can come and live and work there on a permanent basis. So
So
these
great.
10 weeks that start as of next week are almost like, I think, almost the penultimate step, because
Yeah.
we're intending to live and work. This is not vacation. This is not a
Yeah.
business trip. This is a combination of both to
Yeah.
establish, I think, what works and what doesn't work, and what do we like and what do we not like.
Yeah. Right.
We're spending time in Florida. That's where I know we want to go and live on a more permanent basis.
Mm.
But it's the first time, really living there, and
Yeah. I
um,
love that.
yeah, and 6 years in the making at least from having
Right.
written it as
Yeah.
a burning desire.
Well, the interesting thing about this, Andy, and I think that I hope that our listeners really pick up on this. It's really not about the date. Don't be attached to the date. However, just be attached to that burning desire and keep working forward. And I think that's, to me, that's the message of continued growth is, yes, I have a date that I'm putting on there because I want to act with urgency. I want to act as if I'm moving towards that. And also, I'm not going to be attached to that so that I can just keep moving forward. And that's exactly what I've seen in you doing. And each step of the way it's not been easy. I mean, getting your green card was a painful process and a long process, probably longer than maybe you thought. And so I think that the law of gender is in play here. So meaning the law of incubation, and it's the same principle of a farmer putting a seed in the ground, and by writing that card out, you put that seed in the ground. And sometimes we know what the germination period is of a plant. Sometimes, probably for planting something for the first time, we may not know. You planted something for the first time. You didn't necessarily know. You thought you knew, But I
Yeah.
think that's a real important part about growth. And it's just continually moving towards that burning desire. And I think that's really awesome. And you demonstrate that with what you're doing.
And if I may, David, I had to learn that lesson. I was going to say painfully, but I remember it being relatively painful in terms of approaching that original date
Sure.
because I wrote it first at some point in 2018. I
Mm-hmm.
set the date of the 1st of January 2020,
Yeah.
and I went on to my call with our mentor Paul
Yeah.
in October
Mm-hmm.
2019.
Okay.
And I can remember it as if it was yesterday because we signed on to the call, free conference again at the time. It wasn't
Yep.
like this on Zoom.
Sure.
And, Paul and I did the usual, connection piece.
Right.
And his first words out of his mouth when after I'd spoken was, "What's the matter with you?"
Okay.
And I
Well,
said, "Well," and actually, then my next immortal words were, "Well, this stuff that we've been working on, for the last, couple of years doesn't work. Doesn't
wrong
work."
thing to say to him.
And he went, "Okay." He said, "Tell me the reason why it doesn't work." And I said, "Well, come on, Paul." I said, "Look, it's October. You know, the goal I set is 2 to 3 months away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a green card. I don't have a visa. I don't have a place to live. I haven't sold this place." He said, "It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work." And he said, "Let me let me just ask you this, Andy." He said, "Are you closer now than you were?"
Mm.
I know, like mood change completely in terms of
Yeah.
because in my mind it was like, well, that's a stupid question. It's like because it was like, oh yes, and he said, well, tell me how you're closer. Well, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and I've done this.
Yeah.
And he said, so what's your concern? I said, the date.
Mm.
I said, I've missed the date. And then he went to teach me what you just taught, which was
Yeah.
about the law of gender. Because he said, you've got to remember, Andy, with the law of gender, when we set the date, when it comes to goal setting, and this was again a classic, he
Mm-hmm.
says, and at best we're guessing.
Guessing. Yeah. Right. Right. Exactly.
No, we know how long a seed takes to germinate and turn into corn. We know how long,
Yep.
a woman needs to, in terms of be pregnant to give birth
Yes.
to a child. We know the same for a sheep or a giraffe, but we don't know what it's the same for our goal and our dream.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like,
So true.
total free up of, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
and and thank the Lord for that lesson because
Yeah.
it's taken another 4 years.
Right. Right.
Taken another 4 years, and it would have been so easy to
Mm-hmm.
give up, especially because what's made this longer, I believe, and I don't know it to be the truth, was the pandemic.
Sure.
So again,
Sure.
how many dreams and goals did those couple of years, shatter, in terms
Right.
of having to live through those challenges. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
And
it was really
and
interesting.
well, and I think the real key to this as well is if we go back to the book Think and Grow Rich, he talks about persistence. What, chapter 9, I believe it is.
Yeah,
Chapter 9, persistence. And so some of those dreams got shattered, but even though yours may have gotten shattered, I don't know that it got shattered, but maybe, the glass got a little bit, cloudy. You kept
yeah,
pushing on and you kept pursuing that burning desire. And so I
mm,
think that, there's a couple of things that I see here. And I guess for our listeners, one of the things that I think it takes for continual growth is a vision and a
yeah,
burning desire in Napoleon
yeah,
Hill's language. It takes a mentor. It takes somebody to be able to help you, or a coach. I
yeah,
think that's in the world that we live in. It takes a
yeah,
coach. I know that I was just with a coaching client this morning, and we've talked about his goal, and he's not at that goal now, but we also did exactly what Paul did. And it's like, well, tell me where you're at. What have you done so far? What's the progress? And are
yeah,
you closer now than you were when we first started? And of course the answer was yes. So it takes a burning desire, it takes a mentor or a coach. And I think then, the other thing it takes is, some accountability. One of the things that's been a blessing for us is that we have each other to be able to keep each other on track. and challenge each other. I
Yeah.
love that about our relationship is that you're not afraid to challenge me and I'm not afraid to challenge you because we want what's the best for both of us. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else that you can think of that really is involved in helping you to continue to grow in your path?
I, I think that the couple of things that are aligned and similar, I think, David, that spring to mind are it's got to show up. It's
Yeah,
got to show up in your date book, and it's got to show up in your checkbook. So,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, there you've got to keep moving forward. And for me, being the type of personality that I am, the way that I keep moving forward fundamentally is for it to show up in my calendar and show up in my schedule.
yeah, yeah.
I've got to do what it takes,
Mm-hmm.
and the only way I know how to do what it takes is, in addition to having someone like you hold me accountable, I've got to have my calendar, as we say over here, my diary, hold me accountable as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Things have got to go in my calendar. Um, that allow me to do the things that I know that I need to do to just keep taking the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And and also I think the other thing that's probably even more difficult is at a time when sometimes you think, do you know what? I just can't afford it. I
Right.
just can't afford it. You somehow I think got to, dig deep and go and find a way.
Find a way.
Um,
Right.
because
Yeah.
again, anything that I think is worthwhile normally comes at some form of sacrifice, for sure,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, and some form of investment. And for me, it's probably been both, in terms of to get where it is that I wanted to go in this particular goal. I mean, you heard me talking about being mentored by Paul. I mean,
Yep.
for everybody that's listening, a mentor and a coach in most cases doesn't come free.
Right.
um,
Right.
it can come free depending on
Yes.
your
Yeah.
relationships. And, I've had plenty of free time from coaches and mentors, but at some point, that mentor and coach, it needs to earn a living. So, you
Right.
need to pay them for their time. So I think that's incredibly important. And sometimes to pay that, you means that you've got to, I think, look at your bank account and go, well, okay, what have I got to stop investing in right now? What are,
Exactly.
and for me, that when I say stop investing in, over here that was like, well, maybe Sky Sports, needs to stop showing on my TV, the
Sure.
equivalent of Netflix.
Yeah. Right.
Do you take the subscription away from Netflix?
Yeah.
Do I need a TV? I mean, I'm exaggerating to make a point, but
Right. Right.
it's so interesting. I think when we all look at our bank accounts and look at or our credit card statements and look at the things that we've subscribed to,
Yep. Yep.
that
Exactly.
that it's $10 here and $15 there, but do it 10
It adds
times.
up. Yeah. Absolutely. Exactly.
Do it
Yeah.
10 times with Spotify and Netflix and whatever it is. It's like, look, I'm prepared to sacrifice those types of things to
Right.
invest in my dream. So,
Yeah.
that, and always finding a way of taking the next step. And
Yeah.
when the next step hasn't taken you in the right direction,
Yeah.
stop, recalibrate, change direction.
Change the next and look where the next step is. And one of the things that I heard you say there that I think is really important maybe to note is showing up in your calendar, your date book is one thing, because especially from somebody who I control my calendar. And, if we're talking to somebody who's listening, who is a founder of a company, an owner of a business, or somebody, maybe you're in sales and you control your own calendar. It's one thing to put something on the calendar, but it's another thing to honor that commitment to yourself and actually follow through. So honoring commitments, I think, is such an important fundamental success behavior. As a matter of fact, it's on my list of successful succession behaviors that I'm working on right now for business owners. So if you're a business owner and you're listening, be watching for something that I'm putting together that includes honoring commitments, because honoring commitments is one of the fundamental ways to keep
Yeah.
yourself moving forward. And then the second thing that you said is, and this is another fundamental success factor, it's find a way. Find a way. Just because somebody says you can't, or there's a roadblock, or there's a hurdle, doesn't mean there's not. I mean, if you're driving along the highway and there's a sign that says road closed, what do? You have to find an alternate route if you
Yeah,
want to get to the where you want to go.
so
So, I
true.
mean, those two key fundamentals I think are really super important for people to really keep in mind as they continue their growth path.
I always think of you when I'm coaching a client and someone says, that I don't have the time.
Yeah,
And that always prompts me to ask a question in terms of, what time do you start during the day?
right.
What time do you end your day?
Yeah.
And more often than not, the typical response is, 8, 9. It's
Yeah.
like, well, what would happen, if you got out of bed earlier?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
well, I'm not good in the mornings. It's like, well, how badly do you want what it is that you claim that you want? I mean, I know that you're sitting in that
100%.
chair behind you at
Exactly.
5:30 every morning.
You got
Um,
it. Yeah.
Now, I know that you don't. I don't think you do that at the weekend. So in actual fact, you probably enjoy, perhaps getting up at 6:30 or 7:30 if you could always have the choice.
Right, right. Yeah,
But I
absolutely.
know what you gain from your daily habits
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
being in that chair by 5:30 or 6 o'clock every morning with your coffee, and I know what you're,
Yeah.
and it won't be watching the TV. That I know as well, right? Because
You're exactly right. Yeah.
you've told your listeners millions of times what it is you're doing at that
Yeah.
time in the morning.
Yeah.
Honoring that commitment again to what it is that you want and to you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's another thing I think is when we talk about continuing our growth path and continuing our growth journey, it is about our habits and it is about how things show up in our day-to-day life. And it's not sexy. It's not the Instagram, photos of me in a Learjet or a Citation jet or whatever. I mean,
Right.
it's sitting in a chair that quite honestly my dad sat in, 40 years ago. And it's reading books, it's meditating, it's journaling, it's doing the things that I know will
Yep.
move me closer to my goal. Now, one of the things that I think is really interesting about this, just to kind of go back for a second,
Mm.
one of the things that has helped me with that, and I'm guessing you too, it's being around other people who are of the
Yeah.
same mindset. They have the
Yeah.
same values. They want to grow. And I think to me, being in a community of people like that has been simply invaluable. I mean, it started with the John Maxwell team. That's where you and I met. It's continued on the empowered living community. I'm a part of the exchange community. It's having that community of people around you that really help. I know helps me, and I know it helps you as well, but it helps me to be able to keep moving forward and to be challenged. And if I'm
Well,
around other people who are farther along than I am, I know that if I'm feeling uncomfortable because of where I'm at compared to where they're at, it
mm,
inspires me. And I'm not saying we play the comparison game, but I'm just saying it keeps me moving towards my goal because I think, gosh, if they're there, I can keep moving because I know that I can do it too. So I think that having that community around, each of
yeah.
us is really important.
Well, we want people around us, don't we, that are as attached and as wedded to our dream as we are. We
Yeah,
want, and I believe we need, cheerleaders. Yes, of course, we want people that will, challenge us when we're potentially not maximizing our potential, or about to
yeah,
make a decision that's not in service of our dream or our goal. But I think
hmm
also we want people that cheer us on and encourage us, because
yeah,
in my
absolutely.
personal experience of the last 11 years of working by myself, that's not always the case. That's not
hmm
always the case.
Yeah,
And I think as much as you want to be surrounded by the right type of people and be very intentional about that, as you
mm,
and I have done since our John Maxwell days, you also, I believe, have to learn to let other people go. um, you
yes,
know,
yes,
Again, I've learned the phrase from Paul, people are in your life for a reason or a season or a lifetime.
yeah,
Um, and you and I are, are on the journey to a lifetime, and I know it will be a lifetime.
Yeah.
But sometimes people are there just for a quick reason,
Right.
or sometimes people are there for a season. And I think that the difficulty I have with that one is like sometimes what you thought was going to be a lifetime ends up being a season, and sometimes you
Yeah.
end up it does I don't want to sound arrogant, I don't at all, but you end up perhaps outgrowing other people that aren't as
That's right.
committed to what it is that you want and how you want to be as much
Mm-hmm.
as you are. And that doesn't mean to say I don't love them any less. It's just like, that
Right.
I can't quite spend as much time around those
Yeah.
types of people because they perhaps don't want to cheer me on, or they might be slightly envious of what I'm doing, or,
Yeah.
you know, just, asking, that question, what do you want to do that for? Why would you
Right.
want to do that?
Yeah. Right.
And I remember getting it, for very quickly after 2 or 3 years of constantly going back to the John Maxwell team, twice yearly conference that they had. And
Mm-hmm.
people back here were saying, are you stupid? It's like,
Right.
why do you need
Yeah.
to keep going back?
Right. Right.
And I wasn't going back necessarily to learn something new. I was going back to be around my people,
Mm-hmm.
the people
Yeah.
that were friends and wanted to act and be like I wanted to act and be. But more importantly, every 6 months they were cheering and encouraging me on about what it was that I wanted. And they were my network. They were my growth opportunities. They were the
Exactly.
people that were allowing me to coach pro bono when
Yeah.
I wasn't good enough to be paid for being a coach. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not only as, align yourself with the right people, but sadly how sometimes you have to let some of your relationships go because they don't want what it is that you want.
Yeah, and I think that is the tough part of growth is that as
Mm.
you continue to grow, and as you see the people in your life change, and there's times and places for everybody, and like you said, it's not that we don't love them anymore or any less. It's just that
Yeah.
where we're spending our time, where we're investing our time. And I've even been catching myself thinking about spending time versus investing time, because spending time, it just has this connotation of like, whoop, it's gone. But if I'm
Yeah.
investing time, I'm investing in my personal growth. I'm investing in other people's personal growth. And to me, that's going to return something. And it's either going to return something, to them, to me, to us, to the world, or my legacy when I'm gone. And not that that matters a whole lot, but I want my life to count. I think everybody wants their life to count.
Yeah.
And that's, the one of the things that Paul talks about is just as humans, we want fuller expression and fuller expansion of the spirit that's within us. And I come from the perspective of a faith perspective of having that spirit within me that, it just wants to explode and wants to grow. And I think that, to me, like if somebody said to me, you can't buy any more books, you can't listen to any more podcasts, I'm like, slit my throat. Are you kidding me? I can't live. I mean, and these books behind me here are just a small sampling of the heavy boxes that I have down in the garage. But I'm kind of being a little bit jokey here, but I am serious about like the things that I invest my time in. I listen to podcasts. That doesn't cost anything. I do buy books. Those are, minuscule. So if you're looking for a way to grow, for our listeners that are just looking for a way to grow, find a podcast. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, so you've found podcasts.
Yeah.
If you're interested in some books, hit us up. We've got books, and they're not all John Maxwell's books. We have a lot of other books that, one of the ones I'm reading right now, it's close at hand. It's called Buy Back Your Time. And if I'm not mistaken, you called me out on something we were talking about last week, I think it was.
Last Friday. Yeah.
Rightly so. And, because I was talking about doing something, and you said, hello, my friend, do you really want to do that? Is that really what you want to do? And yeah, I'm like, you're right, man. You're right. And so it changed. And by the way, I had that meeting with that person that
Cool.
that we talked about. So, and that's
Well,
another thing. It's
the
taking
point
taking
there, David,
action.
was
Yeah.
the point there was for you in terms of your time is valuable, and it's
Right.
valuable as a coach, as a mentor, as a facilitator,
Sure.
as
Yeah.
as a husband, as a son. It's like and if I said to you, give me a proposal now for your coaching time, I know what sort of investment it would mean for me.
Sure.
So why would you want to be spending that time, which is your hourly rate,
Right.
doing something that you could do for sure,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
and you'd be half decent at it,
Right.
but
Right.
it's not your calling, and it's not where your strength zone, and there's
Right.
probably somebody out there that could probably do it better
Yep.
for a less of an investment in cash than it would be if you
Yeah.
were investing in your own time. I think was the point I was
Exactly.
trying to make for the listeners. Yeah,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
because your
Exactly.
time's got a value to it, right? People pay you for it, and you know what
Right.
that value is.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, so kind of coming back to the theme of growth and we've talked about having a community. We've talked about having a coach, having a mentor, investing in mind expanding things like books and podcasts. I mean, I remember starting my growth journey like way back, probably in my early 20s when I was going through college. There was this catalog. I don't know if it came to the UK, but it was called the Nightingale Conant
Right,
Corporation.
I know the name.
They
Yeah,
were cassette tapes, and then they eventually became CDs. And I had a lot of them. Let's just say in my trunk of my car, in the back seat of my car, stuck in the tape player, stuck in the CD player. Those are some things that I think are really great ways, inexpensive ways to invest in our time. So let me ask this of you, and then I can share some things as well. But what are you working on right now? Like, what are you working on to keep yourself outside of your comfort zone?
oh gosh, I mean it's been a year of real stretch and growth, and probably transition in that space of doing some things for the first time that
Mm,
I think I was probably aware of, that I should have been doing for a long time. And even being surrounded by people like you were probably nudging me and challenging me to do. Um, and I always made an excuse or a reason that I just didn't think I was the person to do that, or probably deep down, that self limiting belief that I wasn't good enough. And
yeah,
the two real big things in the last 12 months have been creating a coaching program to
yeah,
take into corporate businesses that you help me
mm,
deliver, which is a leader as a coach program. So that's
yeah,
a
yeah,
9 to 12 month program where we want to work at changing the behaviors of leaders
yeah,
to a coaching approach rather than from a more formal mentoring or telling approach. And
yeah,
what's the upside of that, and what are
mm,
the benefits to that in terms of individuals and teams, and frankly, bottom line, profit performance.
yeah,
So we've created a program there that we're delivering to corporate organizations. And the second thing this year again that I've done for the first time is create a co- an online coaching program, and a coaching community,
yeah,
um, that I have to say is just giving me so much energy and so much
mm,
excitement,
so
um,
great.
in a way that I never thought it would.
Yeah,
We've created coaching partnerships, and we've created a weekly coaching community where we learn and grow together.
love that.
And when I created that, it just felt like it was part of the process.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's at the heart of what it is that we do now, where we're either coaching live in the confidence of the community, we're giving feedback to that community, to those people that are coaching live.
yeah,
I'm teaching coaching, and we're just having some wonderful conversations together
mm-hmm,
about how you can go from here to there in terms of moving the needle in your coaching ability.
yeah,
And that's given me sustenance in a way that I never ever thought it was. I was
yeah,
Well, I remember how I got there actually, because that's probably quite worthy of a quick story.
yeah,
Again,
yeah,
I shared the idea with Paul, and I walked it through with Paul, my mentor, and he
mm-hmm.
said, "I love it, I love it." He said, "There's one thing that I don't." He said, "There's one thing that's not right." Paul's a mentor and not a coach, right?
We
More
want,
often
yeah,
than not. He said,
right.
"There's one thing that's not right." He said, "You can't be doing monthly calls. You need to be doing weekly calls."
Ah,
And
interesting.
inside, I'm screaming in terms of, how am I going to do a weekly call?
Am I going to do that? Yeah, that's
How
right.
am I going to do that? How am I going
Yeah,
to find the time to do that? but I've learned to
Understood.
trust him. And I
Yeah.
came off the call, and I said to Charlie, it's like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to find the time to do that. Um, but I have, and it's
Yeah.
now the
Yeah.
highlight. It's one of the real highlights of my week.
I love
When I
that, man.
started it back
Yeah.
in May, it was like, oh, this is going to be
Mm.
quite challenging. 90
Yeah.
minutes every week on a Wednesday, noon
Yeah.
Eastern. And now it's just like, oh gosh, it's Tuesday night, sending out the reminder of the call tomorrow and looking forward to being with the community of people that want to grow. And I mean, I
I
know you've
love
been
that,
doing
man.
that for a long time now, but
Yeah.
that's been another real highlight of the year.
Mm.
And I never saw myself doing that a
Sure.
couple of years ago. I might have dreamt of the idea, but I didn't think it was me or was good enough. Going into a studio, recording content,
Yes.
writing scripts.
Yes. Yes. I love
But the
that.
stretch and the growth that comes with doing something for the first time is just incredible. And actually, the inspiration and the motivation it gives you,
Mm.
because you then
Yes.
start to think,
Yes.
well, what else can I do then that I didn't think I could do?
Well, exactly. And I will say, just kind of as I'm looking at the time, and I know you've got a hard stop here for our call, but interestingly enough, as I've watched you go through that process and I've watched you grow, and I'm applauding all the way. It's also inspired me, and so much so that as I was on my sabbatical this year, I thought I need to realign my emerging leader inner circle program. And so one of the things I'm doing is I've already started creating the scripts and the videos for the Emerging Leader Academy that will be a part of the Emerging Leader Inner Circle. So, seeing you do something for the first time has inspired me to do something for the first time. So that's, in conjunction with, just collaborating with you on Leader as a Coach. I think that's been, a really highlight for my year as well, just to keep myself growing, because you can get in a rut. Let's face it,
Oh,
it can get
yeah.
comfortable. But being around other people who are growing, who are doing something for the first time, so valuable, so valuable.
And
Well, my friend, yeah,
I had another. One of the things we're doing in this coaching program is that the coaching partners are recording their live coaching,
yes,
and then they're uploading them, and you and I and the team are reviewing them.
yes.
As one of the calls that I was listening to this morning came to an end, the person who should remain nameless said, he said, I've been in many coaching programs. And he said, and I won't use the name, he said, the so-called best coaching program. And he said, this is by far the best
I love
I've
that.
ever been in. And I'm
That's
thinking,
amazing.
oh,
Yes.
oh, that was just as he was finishing his coaching call and debriefing with his client. It's like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, and I didn't think I was doing anything that significant, but
Yeah,
to
yeah.
that, just it made everything so worthwhile in terms of so how do I make this better?
Right,
Because people
right.
from it anyway.
Continue to
Apologies.
the yeah, no. Continue to the next, the next arrival point. Well, I guess that's the thing. Maybe, as we wrap up here, one of the things I'll just share for our listeners is, first of all, growth is a never ending journey. I mean, it only ends when, our life here on Earth, the planet, ends. And so continuing to keep, your sights set on something in the future, something that will inspire you to do something for the first time. And I hope that our conversation here today has inspired you to do something. What's your main takeaway? What's your one thing that you will do? Don't try to figure out like 5 things from our conversation. Just one thing. What's one thing that you're going to do? And if you're open to it, you're listening and you've made it here to the end, send me a note. David at davidmcglennon.com, Andy at andyhallcoaching.com. I mean, either one of us, let us know that you've listened. Let us know that you've taken action, and we're going to cheer you on, man. We are going to cheer you on. And, we're really excited about the growth path that, Andy and I are on. And we're going to keep growing. So if you want to keep growing, keep coming back to In the Growth Space. And my friend, thank you for being here. This is a new segment that we're going to do. And thank you for agreeing to do it on a regular basis. I thought, how much fun would it be
Yeah.
just to have, us to get together and just to kind of share where we're growing, and it's not all, rainbows and unicorns, right? I mean, I know for a fact that, your leader as a coach program, and also the coaching program has taken some, it's taken some blood, sweat, and tears. And so it's taken some time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you, my
having
friend.
me. I really appreciate you being on, and thanks to the listeners for tuning in. I really appreciate them listening to us.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for listening. Thank you if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Please make sure to go out and like, subscribe, give us a rating, give us a review. Let us know what you thought. We'd really, really appreciate it. So until next time, stay in that growth space and be well.